Well, just dive right in here. Welcome, everybody. Guys, my name is Rob Schlissel. I am the Senior Marketing and Partnerships Director and Senior Producer here at the Shorty Awards. We're super excited to have all of these wonderful panelists and moderator with us today for the third installation of the Shorty Social Good Series, a webinar series that we kicked off this year. It's our 5th year celebrating social good and all the work being done by brands and organizations to make our world a better place. You know, we spun this off. The main Shorty Awards started a little over 12 years ago, recognizing the best in social media and digital. And one of the biggest trends in our award show was seeing how much social good work was being done. And as we all know, the society today is in a place where there's a lot of really interesting things taking place, and social good is finally really at the forefront of people's attention and attitudes. And so it's important for us to recognize that and address the great work that's being done, which led us to introduce the Shorty Social Good Awards. If you have any interesting work that you are interested in getting recognized for, the final deadline is next Wednesday, September 16th. You'll have an email from one of our producers after this webinar. If you're interested in finding out more information, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to chat with you. Now, diving into today, the third installation, as we mentioned, this episode is all about agencies and how they are uniquely positioned to help companies in a variety of industries bring about meaningful change using social and digital media and transforming their creative ideas into impactful realities and activations. So speaking of those awards and the agencies, our moderator today, who is a long-time supporter of the Shorty Awards, is not only one of our Real-Time Academy members who has been judging for many years, but she is also the EVP Executive Creative Director at Weber Shandwick and has personally won many awards here, both at the Shorty Awards and the Shorty Social Good Awards and many other competitions. So with that, Jenna Young, please take it away. Look forward to hearing this conversation, and hope you guys do too.
Hey, Rob, thank you. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, so I'm really excited to spend the next probably 55 minutes chatting, just to give you guys a sense of what we're going to do today. We have a spectacular panel, so we're going to try to give them as much time as possible to cover. We've really narrowed it down to 4 to 5 questions, so we're going to talk through those, and it's basically around, as advertised, how an agency can do good, and how, as the counselors for brands, we can help really give people the tools that they need to do the best work that they can right now. How the format is going to be is we're going to go through the 4 to 5 questions. There is a Q&A. We are saving the last 10 minutes for Q&A, so when you look down next to your chat button, if you have any questions that you'd like to make sure that we address, please drop them there, and then we'll make sure to have time to go through those as well. So I'm now going to turn it over to our phenomenal panel to let them do a quick 60-second introduction so you get a sense of their backgrounds and expertise on this topic. I'm going to start with Kathy.
Hey everybody, I'm Kathy Delaney, and I'm Chief Creative Officer at Publicis Health and Saatchi & Saatchi Wellness. I entered the healthcare space about 8 years ago, having been on the general side for many, many years. And I have to say it's been the most rewarding part of my career, because I've been able to use health as a platform really for doing the social good that Jenna was just talking about, addressing issues that people weren't necessarily considering health issues, like gun violence, and recognizing communities of people like the deaf who weren't able to get a call into an emergency 911 because they can't speak, giving them an app so that they could help themselves during an emergency situation, helping the homeless, feed the homeless and help the homeless with shelters, with crossroads communities. All of those things I've been able to do through using health as a platform, and it's been quite a journey, and one that I've enjoyed very much.
Okay, we're going to continue to go clockwise. We're going to go to Sandy.
Hi everyone, and thanks for having me. Yes, my name is Sandy. I started out teaching in LA for 2 years, and then after that I moved up to Google, so started client side. I worked done a bunch of different things, but found myself really drawn to brand projects and purpose-driven work. And through partnerships and working with other companies, really saw how that was becoming not only important, but actually like critical to the bottom line for many companies. So decided to leave and start my own agency focused on this intersection of purpose-driven work and technology. And so I've been doing that for the last few years. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Great. We're and now Baina.
Hi everyone, my name is Baina Black and I am the Global Sustainability and Impact Manager at RGA. I've been at RGA for almost 4 years, but recently took on this role about 6 months ago. And within RGA, I've worked in our venture studio and our content studio, and also am a former art director. I actually started my career in advertising and have pivoted quite a bit to film and television, finance, venture capital, and I am an avid traveler. I absolutely love it, and I am actually reporting live from Jamaica right now because I left the US. So my 3 main pillars are sustainability, technology, and storytelling. Everything that I do falls under one of those 3. I'm also a licensed drone pilot and VR filmmaker, and I am really, really excited to have this conversation with all of you.
We're really excited to have your perspective as well. Jeff, should we give you a do-over? Because I think that we got about halfway through and then we lost you.
Yeah. Am I coming in clear now?
You are.
Okay, great. Well, joining Bright House has been a real privilege, and I am so thankful for the news. So we are purpose. Our focus is on purpose, but we're a global creative consultancy. And over the years, we've been able to expand and create also an office in Berlin and Paris. And then we work with a wide range of clients. So anything from tires to healthcare, soft drinks, and everything in between. But of course, using purpose to do good is the thing that is most rewarding. So I love that we get to dig into the roots and then start to come up with some great creative deliverables that are really going to push the planet and, of course, the people to do better things.
Okay, so let's dive in. Let's start giving advice to the companies and the brands and the agencies who are trying to do exactly that. Today, we know that consumers are looking for more from CEOs, from organizations, and from brands than they ever have before. They're constantly being asked to step in and to step up. But there's also lately a lot more scrutiny in the authenticity behind the messages. When you have brands who really want to make a difference, how do you help make sure they don't make a mistake? Can you share some best practices or maybe a watch out for companies that are starting to get into this space? And Jeff, since you kind of teed it up, I'm going to throw this one to you first.
Oh, thanks. It's such a great question. I think too often brands dabble in the idea of, kind of trying to get attention, but it's not always based on who they are or the role in the world that they provide. So for us, it can lead, that can lead to serious criticism and of course backlash. And we continue to see that, globally. So for us, the main thing is it's always got to start with the company's purpose. And so one example is, we worked with Mercedes-Benz, and we did a lot of great research digging in, there in Stuttgart and around Germany, but then also interviewing people from around the world to make sure that we were reflecting that brand, and not only, understanding that, hey, here's this company that is currently a leader in manufacturing of automobiles. They, of course, invented the automobile, but they've always done great things like giving away safety patents to other manufacturers. For us, what we wanted to do is articulate the purpose to help drive and mobilize the workforce to think bigger. And so for them, their purpose line was first move the world. And that is an amazing, very clear statement, but it's also something that motivates and allows them to push themselves and to once again really start to get at the forefront of what can do great things. It also helped push their leaders. And so their leaders started to think about the impact they were having on the planet as a longtime manufacturer. And so that helped them start to really push for some bold commitments. And bold commitments I love is that they were about really making a stand for carbon neutral manufacturing. And so they led a very ambitious goal there, one that's even greater than their closest competitor, which is VW. And then what's great too is that the purpose helped even a new CEO coming in to think even bigger and more ambitious. with their stand. So I think for us, we just want to make sure that companies are taking those the purpose seriously, and then also, of course, pushing for bold commitments that are going to make our planet better.
Sandy, do you have a different perspective on it?
I mean, quite similar, I think, to what Jeff was saying, but I think that this whole idea of purpose-driven work and purpose-driven marketing is like crucial to companies nowadays. You know, we see that 62% of consumers want to buy from people with or from brands that have value and have purpose. We've seen 91% of consumers say that they would switch from the brand that they currently have to another one of a similar quality and price if they had a purpose and if they had mission. So it's really important, and I'm glad that to see brands and organizations really jumping on board. I think, kind of per what Jeff said, something that's really important is to do an internal review of what you as a company are trying to do and why you're trying to do it. And alongside of that, what is the best way you can make an impact? Is it donating? Is it acting? Is it giving some of your time and resources? There's a variety of options. And consumers are smart. They know when you're doing something just for show, and they know when you're doing something because you actually care, and that's the best use of your resources. So being really honest with yourself as a company and a brand, and doing that internal review with your employees and stakeholders can really help get to that area of where you can actually make an impact in the area that you've decided to go.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a time for actions, not just empty gestures. Baina, do you have any thoughts on how to best navigate this time and space as we're giving advice to our clients?
Yeah, totally. And then also going off of what Jeff and Sandy just said in terms of the authenticity as well is looking at your partners. Who are you partnering with? I think that a lot of times we try to reinvent the wheel unnecessarily. And a tip that I give to brands also is really to establish authentic relationships with nonprofits and NGOs and organizations that are focused on particular issues, specifically that are related to your purpose, your company's purpose. And establish those relationships so that when something does happen, i.e. the world's reckoning with racism, it's not necessarily like you're coming out of the blue with a solution or scrambling to try to figure out how you will authentically make impact. And then also, I think another good practice is like looking at the UN's SDGs, right? There are 17 of them, and just go down the list and identify organizations that are tackling each of those issues, just so you have it kind of in your Rolodex. So you're, again, not scrambling to figure out who are the best players or organizations to partner with in that space. You can be prepared.
Right, so it's really important that it ties back to your main business and your consumers, but also that you have the right allies and partners on board to make sure that you can really make an impact and a difference. Before we move on to the topic, Kathy, do you have anything you'd like to add, or should we?
Yeah, I mean, just building on all the great things that these guys just said, I think it's really important to make sure that all the brands that we're working with have that purpose and have those values set in stone. So I think all of us would agree, how many companies did we see come out there that suddenly seemed to have a whole set of values because the pandemic hit?
Mm-hmm.
Commercial over and over again, starting with we're all in this together, and now more than ever. And unless those brands had a core value beforehand, people are just like, stop, it's bullshit. And unless you're giving me something tangible, I don't want to hear you. You're just more noise. One of the things that I love that I'm seeing some of my brands do in the healthcare space is that they're acknowledging the fact that people have lost their jobs, the fact that certain treatments and drugs are expensive. So they're coming up with ways to give people a break and give them some relief and give them some financial aid so they can still keep getting their therapies and still keep living the quality of life that they've become accustomed to. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. You don't actually have to look that far. You can look at inside your company first, and then really just go look at your customers and how can you help them? How can you be there for them? And how can you really make a meaningful impact in their life? I think that leads us to our next question, which is, how do you pick? There are so many competing things that a brand, now the brands are being asked to do so much. They may have invested a lot and have a purpose and be very much focused on one space. I thought a lot around all of the people who probably had huge programs, year-long commitments, who were looking forward to Earth Day as a big moment to talk about their commitment to sustainability. And those plans, of course, had to change when we were in the height of COVID. So in the larger picture, so many other initiatives, so many other charities, so many other purposeful driven, really important issues are out there. But right now the oxygen in a way is getting sucked out of the room. So how do you guys, do you have any advice for brands who maybe their core purpose, the thing that their brand stands for, just isn't a priority today? Do they shift focus and jump on the bandwagon of the other crises that are happening? Or do they find a way to continue to tell their story in a time when there's so much competing for attention? I would say, Kathy, do you mind, since you kind of teed up that question, could you give me your perspective on that one?
Absolutely. So I think they have to do both, Jenna. I think they have to have the empathy for whatever the, issue du jour is that we all need to address. But I also think they have to, stay true to what they're trying to do from a bigger purpose standpoint. And from a healthcare perspective, it is giving people a better quality of life, helping them with certain illnesses and conditions that they have. And one of the things that I'm recommending for my brands and some of the things that I see them doing already is that if health is a priority, it doesn't just stop with the pandemic. It doesn't stop at COVID. We can't all be hiding in our homes, afraid to get COVID and not getting our cancer screenings, not getting our yearly checkups, not getting our mammograms. Like all of those things are still vitally important and still, should have a huge space in our brains. So encouraging people to still carry on and take care of themselves amidst COVID and what's going on in the world is really, really key.
You know what I think is so interesting about this question too is if we think about why do we have a lot of the issues that we have in the first place, right? And I'm like totally not the D&I person, which is a whole other conversation, right? But when we talk about equity, right? Like you're talking about healthcare, Kathy, and the crisis of the day or whatever, but why is it a crisis in the first place and why does it affect people the way that they do in the first place? So when we talk about like the triple bottom line of people, planet, profit, I'm actually really happy that we are focusing a lot more on people and not the other two per se, because it's time. Like I've always been focused on the people first and less on planet and profit, to be honest with you. And so I think that we're being given the opportunity to look at all of these issues from a different lens, and so while like a brand's, main purpose or whatever it was that they were focused on before, we can now look at it and say, well, how has this been affecting people that we have ignored for so long? So, I don't necessarily feel like it's, one or the other. It's an opportunity for us to kind of do a rehaul of everything and take a different perspective on all of it.
Yeah, that's a really important point. They're not mutually exclusive. And I think even though brands should focus, there's so much overlap that it is kind of vitally important to make sure that you are looking through the impact that you can have and still stay true to the focus areas that you have committed to. Sandy, what are the guidance and advice that you give to clients when they're looking to prioritize, or maybe they just don't even know where to start given the sort of environment of the day?
Like, as in how do they choose what their focus should be?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about, and a couple of different panelists have referenced this, but I think it's all about building a long-term relationship, right? So it's like looking at your value and your company. What are the products you provide? Who are the people that you hire within your company? What is it that really resonates? And then from there, like, what do you guys want to support? There are very clear things like, so for example, Patagonia, clearly an outdoors brand, but for a long time, they've been working very hard on like, how can they affect policy, right? And continuing to go in that direction. That being said, they have been called out since the start of Black Lives Matter, or not since the start of Black Lives Matter, but since George Floyd specifically, about not doing enough and only having focused on the environment. And they were quiet for a while, I think probably for too long. And then they came out this week and were like, hey, we know that we've made a mistake. We know we need to, like, we still care about the environment, but we need to address like what is going on and what we've been ignoring. So we're going to be working on that. And because consumers know that they have done that with the environment and their other issues, like we have faith that they will at least try to figure out what they can do moving forward. And, you know, a different brand that you could think about is, you know, Ben and Jerry's, who have been incredibly committed to these types of social causes forever. And so when, you know, this moment appeared, they're like, yes, let's go even more. And it makes sense because that's what they've been doing and we all trust them, as opposed to, you know, what Kathy alluded to earlier. Some brands are like, we're on the bandwagon, and everyone's like, we see through. You know, so I think just to wrap that up, the important thing is just to be authentic and understand why you're trying to be involved. And like, if no one was going to find out about it, would you still do it? And if the answer is yes, move forward. If the answer is no, reevaluate.
Point. Jeff, to the point about the prioritizing, do you have any thoughts on how brands can continue to get their message out if the attention seems to be in other areas? Is it time to just be quiet and kind of wait, or are there things that you feel it's important to, like, how would you help someone, you know, kind of, do they stay the course? Do they wait for the right moment? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that the company has to be ready to speak up, but only if they have the right things to back it. So I think too often we see companies that react in the situation, kind of what Kathy was getting at, and then they obviously we're only doing it back to the, you know, getting attention. But I think that's the thing where it has to be real, and I think that's the big thing is and true to who they are. And I think that's so important that companies focus on where their strengths intersect with the needs in the world. And I think that's where we really see companies come into their own if they're ready for that. And I think that's the other big thing is making sure that companies have a real game plan. A lot of companies are missing the mission and the vision, and then they may say they have purpose, but it's a little foggy. I think that's the thing. More and more companies need to be very clear, and then also have the actual action plan laid out, and then all the tools ready to go, because otherwise that's where people start to call their bluff, and that's where a lot of companies are lacking right now.
Yeah, and to make it real, it has to be measurable. Can we talk a little bit about how we look at KPIs or analytics, or how do you start knowing what the right amount to invest in? How do you start to know when something's successful? What are your thoughts about the measurability of this? Baina, you want to take that? I know that you had.
Yeah, you know what? This is one of my favorite things to talk about is how we measure impact, because it's such a huge challenge. You know what I mean? And I can't even say that I've gotten it right. I'm actually like developing a system for that right now. But what I'd say is like for us to first like look at the data, listen, do a lot of social listening and find out what people actually need. And I think we'll really get into this a bit later in the panel about what people actually need in particular groups, because I think that a lot of times things are done out of vanity and they don't push the needle. And something that I actually did for the Pay It Forward Live campaign for Verizon that we ran during, well, we're still in the pandemic, but basically, we had a bunch of celebrities do these live streams to raise money for small business owners. And Alicia Keys was one of our guests. And she shouted out Harlem Candle Company, and I actually know the owner, ironically. And so I reached out to her and I asked her a series of questions in terms of like, did that shout out actually impact your business? And the answer was no. And so the reason why was because we didn't necessarily like mention her website or her handle or, you know, these kind of things. And so what I was able to do was basically like take this report back to the team and say, hey, this is what Terry said. Here's how I feel like we can shift. But in terms of like how we measure that, I think that we need to kind of get out of Dex and get off of Google a lot and actually like talk to the people that we're trying to impact and find out if our methods are working. I don't think that we do that enough. It's kind of like, okay, great. We spent all this money on this great campaign. We hope it works. And that aftermath of measuring the impact isn't enough. And I've been learning that quite a bit the past few months. So in terms of how to measure and what that looks like and what the success look like, I think if we set some goals to say, okay, if this particular group is having issues with access to internet, and then we in Verizon, we can get them access to internet, and their kids can now do their work at home. Like, that's successful, you know what I mean? But like, kill the vanity projects, because we are way past that. And I think that is something that both pandemics actually have really stressed. But if any of the attendees too have any suggestions for like how they might be measuring impact, please share. You guys are so quiet over there.
I'm going to just build on one thing that you said, though, from a creative standpoint. As you were talking about it, I also feel like it's so important to make sure that you are talking to, or ideally have someone in the ideation be part of the community that you're reaching out to. Because a lot of times you'll see brands make missteps because they are very well intentioned and they believe that they can provide the right message, help people, that they understand the issue. But sometimes even from word choices that are used or the way that a situation is being depicted, we've all seen those moments when you go, that team wasn't actually close enough to living and breathing the problem. They don't walk in the shoes of the people. So not to derail us off the measurement, but just to echo what you're thinking, it's also so important to know that the work is reflective of the people who it's aiming toward, and that's the really important to have such a deep knowledge.
Jenna, you know what? This is something I'm so passionate about because it just blows my mind. Think about it, right? Let's think about the advertising industry, right? We're pretty privileged, most people, right? You make a certain amount of money, you live somewhere, like you have things, okay? And a lot of times the people who we are trying to help, right, are not reflective of who's in the agency. But somehow these surveys get sent out, right? And we come back and say, this is what people want. How? We did not like, and that goes back to also what Sandy was saying too, and I was mentioning earlier about establishing these relationships. This is also where representation matters, you know, like who you have in the room. Are you listening to them? Because if you're not, then, and it's all relative, you know, like this isn't getting away from measuring impact at all. It's all the same, because I work directly with the creatives and I'm like right there with them. Like we are on Zoom for hours brainstorming, and I'm like, no, don't say this. Yes, this works. Here's who we should be pulling in. Like it's so important. It's so important to have people like us partnering with the teams very closely when they're doing this work as well, because we're the ones who have the heart, you know, and really care about this stuff.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. I mean, that's the thing that I love about our work is getting out there and doing the research, but also getting immersed, you know, so you're not only hearing it on the front end, but you're also able to influence the work that you're doing. So that way you can really raise the level of inspiration by the time you've done your work. And before, you know, our contract ends, we want to make sure that we've done all that we can to equip them. And then also, of course, having the right measurement. I love hearing the measurement because when I joined Bright House, we didn't have analytics until BCG acquired us. So everything that we said was very much, hey, we're the founders of purpose. You know, we've been doing this for 20 years. But to put the numbers to it helps in so many different situations. But I think the thing for me is it always goes back to the story to see the real proof. And so like there were a couple projects we did where we got to see the measurement in the store of a giant retailer and to see the reactions people are having to the work that we were doing. And what it meant to them, because it was also incentivizing an amazing reward that changed their lives. So I think the thing for us is always making sure that you're right. You got to get in there at the beginning to make sure you really truly understand the client or the brand, and then you've also got in the middle have another check-in, and then of course come back later to make sure that it's truly all working.
I would also jump in and just say, like, having come like client side and having worked at Google where it's like data numbers all the time, it was so important that we had to know before we started like what our end result was going to be. So like the measurement was built into the very beginning of the brief, and it's something that we continue to do now. So like I think going back to everybody's points, it's really important to have the right people in the room, have that representation, know what you're trying to do, and know what you want to achieve at the end before you even start the brief process. And sometimes it's like, okay, we have our creative, like how many people are going to see it? But more like, okay, from the beginning, if we want people to see it, should it be this kind of creative? Should it be something totally different? So starting with those numbers that you want to end up with, I feel like is a really important starting point as we want to bring purpose to this place.
think that's spot on, Sandy. And I think, you know, Bain and what you and Jeff have been saying, I think, you know, who are you bringing to the table at the onset? I like to call it the new storytellers. And it is the data and analytics guys. It is the engagement folks. It is the copywriters and the art directors. It's everybody getting on the same page with and aligning on what the goal is from the get-go. That is what I'm seeing is making the most progressive work.
Yeah, I still feel like we're dancing around a little bit, the starting with ourselves before we go to our clients and helping them. And I think we do look across the industry, and it seems like this is a time when people are really looking at making some adjustments, and they're looking at everything from hiring and building those teams, making sure you have representation, to our day-to-day working and the way briefs are written and the values of the agencies, and how we start kind of approaching our own work and our own industry. And we're making some shifts ourselves. Do you guys have any like things that you've seen agencies doing that you're impressed by, or you know, some steps that you think should be top of mind for people? How do we start kind of looking internally so that we can be in a position to go and talk to our clients to make sure they're doing good as well? Whether it's a couple of years ago, Gray did, I thought, a really interesting thing. They added into every brief just a question of, could this work further inclusion? And I just thought it was this interesting little moment where it was just like, make people stop and think, oh, are we missing an opportunity to do, you know, a little bit better with the work that we're doing? And potentially there may be some other plans afoot.
I'm not sure that I 100% understand you, to be honest. Like, are you saying in terms of what more can brands do besides hiring more diverse people, or
agencies? What can we do with agencies? Are agencies making any adjustments today, or thinking about the way that they approach clients or the work any differently?
Yeah, I'd say, like, going off of our measurement conversation, you know, like one of the suggestions that I have in our sustainability plan is to create a metric system, like a rubric system for how we grade our work. FCB has the brand Bedrock. I used to work there and I really admired this work when it came out, but it's basically from 1 to 8. And 1 is like, did we just fill, you know, the world with more junk, or did we actually do something about it? And this particular one that I created is how much impact did we move the scale for good? And I think that we need to put more systems in place like that. And beyond that, the accountability as well, that we're holding ourselves accountable and making sure that we're checking. And I'll tell a really quick story about this. So I worked on Instagram for most of last year, and the creatives, this was when I was a creative, we took over casting, right? And we created this very quick metric system where we looked at who we were casting and we wrote it all down, right? And you would be so surprised that we were very diverse and all women, I think like one guy, right? And we still over-indexed on white males in terms of who we cast, right? And so that made us stay like 2 extra hours, and we had to do it all over again. But having that very simple metric system of saying, okay, we're going to literally count everything, helped us to be more inclusive in our work and what we did. And now at RGA, we actually have a creative council that's made up of like our CCOs, so Tiffany Rolfe, and then the head of our business affairs office as well. And if anything seems off, it's flagged to them and they review it. They have a council that reviews the work, and already, like this council just started like a month and a half ago, and already there have been things that have been flagged, and you can report it anonymously, that were related to equity. So, you know, all that means. And basically, like, the work was changed. It cost a little bit more money sometimes, but it was worth it in the end. And the clients, like, we would bring it to the clients and they'd say, okay, like, this is worth the investment to make this right. So that's something that we've done.
Great. Anyone else, or should we keep moving? All right, okay, we'll keep going on. We talked a little bit about equity, and it does seem like that is a theme that we keep seeing come up again and again. It is almost the through line. It's a little bit underlying some of the work with COVID. It's been underlying a lot of the conversation we've had about racial justice. When you see underlines in health. How do we, so it feels like that, you know, now obviously is the time where that's something that's more front and center, and that everyone has a time to address it. And you can almost see there's so many ways in, and so many different industries that's impacting, and so many different, sorry, I'm just seeing a reminder, Q&A, folks. Put all your questions that you want to make sure that we cover in the Q&A so that we don't miss them, because there might be great stuff in the chat. But you're going to get bounced out and you'll be behind all the people in the Q&A. So make sure your questions go in there. So I think the thought here is how do we start, again, as we're out there doing purpose, as we're doing good, how do we make sure that we are reflecting everyone out there in a way that's really acknowledging the push for better equity and equality?
Okay, I can start. So, I mean, we had a conversation before this, right? And we were kind of wondering who should answer. And Baina was like, I don't want to have to be the person to answer this as the only Black person on the call, which I think is very fair. And all of us were just silent. And then her point was that we should, and I want to let you give your own point clearly, but one of her points was that there should be, this is exactly the reason that there should be more people of color within different companies and within different agencies to help drive this conversation, because I think so many of us, clearly myself included, are afraid of doing the wrong thing or not really knowing what the right answer is, that it's like, that's where we like, it's integral to like all of us moving forward, both as agencies and for brands and organizations, to do exactly that. I mean, my answer would have been like, I don't know the right answer. So I would have been like, let's, find the right diversity consultant. Let's find the right person to answer. And I think, unfortunately, it's been falling a lot on our colleagues of color to come to the table and be that voice for us, which really is not fair. So I pretty much stole her answer, and then we'll kick it off.
You didn't. And I love that I love the transparency. I really am enjoying this panel. I have to say that in the middle of it. But I want to talk about like how I've been advising our clients and our teams, right? And so there are two things that we're really talking about here, right? Specifically, I'm going to talk about Black people and the reckoning with racism. We're talking about power, and we're talking about wealth. And I don't change my answer. And there's some statistics that I want to share with you in terms of why it's important to understand that these are the two issues, right? So in 2017, there was this report that came out called The Road to Zero Wealth. And basically, the results of it said that by 2053, which is in 33 years, the median Black income average is going to zero out if nothing is done about the wealth gap in the US, right? And so if we know this, right, and also there's another report called the Tapestry Report that looks at Black businesses in America. And the reason why I bring up this report is because if a Black person has a business, they are 12 times wealthier than one who doesn't. And we're talking about ownership here. A lot of people think that owning a house is how, Black people will excel and create wealth, but it's not true. It's actually the number one way is owning a business. And so with that being said, if we know this information, right, and we know that specifically Black people need more power, more wealth, the way that I've been advising our teams and our clients are, what are you doing about that, right? We have a wealth gap, we have a credit gap, and we have trust gap. Those are the three main barriers that Black people face when it comes to starting their own business. And so it's really important to know this information, in my opinion, so that we know how to build a strategy to really make impact. Because all these other things, giving people a platform, I just dropped my phone, sorry. Giving people a platform, amplifying voices, all of this stuff is just like, yeah, but is it helping to create wealth? Because if it's not, it literally doesn't matter, and there's data that proves it. And so for Verizon, for Ally, for many other clients, this is what I've been telling them, is sharing this information and sharing these reports. And I understand we have a very limited amount of time that we have to like come up with these campaigns and present to the client. But it's so important to understand like the root cause of like how we got here in the first place. And then what can your brand do that is in alignment with your purpose to make a difference? And so I share all that to say, and I can put like all these links in the chat, but that is how I've been talking about equity. And also one other thing I want to add, and pardon the noise if you hear noise, but the other thing I want to add too is yesterday I was tuning into Ad Color, and there was another report that came out by Elderman, and it's it's basically like their Racial Justice in America report. It's a special report they did. And it talks about, one of the sections was about taking care of your own house, right? Like how brands need to take care of their own house and get their house in order. And that's so important to understand, because before you go do something out externally or outward facing, are you taking care of your own people? And so if we know that, you know, by 2053, if nothing's done about the racial wealth gap, that Black families are going to hit zero. What are you doing for your own people? Are you helping them with their debt if they have debt? Like, that's not a thing, but it should be. You know, are you helping them to acquire a home? I know Bank of America has a program where they help their employees with their first loan. Like, are you helping your own people first? Because if you aren't, what are you doing? You know, and indeed, we need to start having those conversations, those very real conversations. The people who are doing this work for you, are you taking care of them? And likely you're not. And so like, you can fix your own house first. That's okay, because you're still making impact. Before you go pledge $1 billion, that's crazy to me. Nike laid off so many people, right? But then they pledged all of this money to like Black Lives Matter. How does that work? That's something like, I'm super curious about, like, how does that work? How does that make sense? In my opinion, it doesn't. I just talked for a really long time, but
no, thank you for sharing. And I think what you just brought up with the Nike thing is that, yeah, it once again pulls back the curtain. And it feels like it's, you know, smoke and mirrors, you know, versus truly being honest and also doing the right thing. And I think that's a thing there where, yeah, they do some things right, but back to getting attention. What gets attention? $1 billion, not we're having layoffs and why are we having layoffs? So yeah, there's a lack of transparency.
And what you were saying makes me think too, again, from a health and wellness perspective, like one of the things that I'm thinking about and talking about and seeing a little movement in is that wellness isn't just for people who can afford it, right? And we have to think of wellness for everybody. And wellness isn't something that you could buy. It is something that you could buy if you have enough money, but your wellness is impacted by your socioeconomic conditions, your culture, where you're like all of those things. So brands have to start factoring in that. And if their purpose is truly to make everybody enjoy wellness, all of those things have to be factored in, and they have to make, you know, accommodations for that.
Yeah, I think we've actually just circled back to where we started, which is that you have to make sure that it is authentically true to your own company. And I think that the advice makes sense really in all cases, is look at the impact you're going to make first and start with your own company and your own brand. And I think whether that is equality or that is sustainability, it's really making sure that you have the right footing to get into the conversation. And maybe that perfect shouldn't be the enemy of progress. For people who haven't gotten where they should be, they don't have a great record, it's not a reason to shy away and it's not a reason to stop. It's that you know exactly where to start. You have a starting point. And I think on anything where you want to do good and anywhere where you want to kind of bring your values to life, the values start inside the company. And then
equity is sustainable too. Like equity is a part of sustainability. And I don't know if you guys know, right? Do you guys know about SASB?
No.
Okay, so I refer to this quite often in panels, but it's the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, right? And for advertising, right, our three key areas that we should be focusing on and when it comes to sustainability are data privacy and protection, advertising integrity, and workforce diversity and inclusion. And so everything we're talking about, it relates back to sustainability. How it looks, you know, that will vary brand to brand, but it's all sustainable. It's all sustainability.
Yeah. Okay.
Say that like having a more diverse workforce and like putting the effort towards equity, as you were saying with Bank of America, like who has their own problems, but actually like helping their like employees get loans, et cetera, is that it's better for the company's bottom line and for their workforce. Like there's data and numbers out there to show. I think it's something like you have like a 2.3 times higher cash flow for companies that are more diverse. They're like 73% more likely to capture new markets for companies that have like have hired towards more diverse backgrounds as opposed to quote unquote culture fit. So I would say like not only is it sustainable, it's necessary and something that like we all need to recognize as opposed to be like, that'd be nice. It's like, that's what we all need to do.
Yeah. So we are coming up on the Q&A and I wanted to just get one quick lightning round, which is what is something or someone out there right now that's just making you feel good? You know, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about the problems that we need to solve in the world, but who's making you happy or what's making you happy today? Who's doing it right? Jeff, do you want to start?
Sure. I think for me, there's an artist here in Atlanta, Fahamu Peku, who's just constantly finding different ways to get his message across. And what I love about him is that he's not afraid to express himself. And I think that comes across in all of his different projects. But I think for me, it's the, hey, we can look at, you know, instead of looking at a blank canvas, he's ready to fill anything with his message. And that could be merchandise, that could be paintings, but it also can be a vehicle or it can be something else. And I think that's the thing for us, is to make sure that there's an element of unexpected in it, but it's also about driving a really clear message and not being afraid.
Anybody else?
I can go next. I want to shout out an organization called WOKESIS, and it stands for Women of Color, Collective, and Sustainability. I love the work that they're doing. They're barely a year old, and I'll put the link in the chat as well. And then also someone who's making me happy is Anthea Kelsek, who is the co-CEO of B-Lab. And one thing that I love that they've recently decided was that they are not going to partner with organizations that are not B Corps, which I thought was a pretty brave move, because right now everybody wants to partner with them and they've made this decision. So those are the two that are making me happy.
Anthea, what's making you happy these days?
So I'm not going to spotlight a specific person or company, but because it's actually my own, and that's kind of selfish. But what I'm seeing is really what's making me really happy. What I'm seeing happening in the healthcare industry is a much broader sense of sustainability for the planet, not just individual people's health, but how are the treatments and the drugs that we're giving people to support their health, what does that look like, and how does that affect the planet? And we have a soft launch tomorrow for the first ever paper prescription pill bottle. And it's an open source design that we've developed with the company in Israel. And we are getting it out there tomorrow and hoping that the CVSs of the world and the Walgreens and the Walmarts embrace it, and that you are now able to walk into any pharmacy and get your prescription in a completely biodegradable paper pill bottle.
Love that so much.
Sandy, how about
Yes.
you?
I mean, there's like a lot of different things and people out there these days. I'm in the midst of all this craziness. But I think that there's like two people I've recently been following that or have followed for a while, but have like recently been top of mind. One is Green Girl Leah, and the other one is, her name is Patty Gonia. She's transgender, and her whole, both of their talk about intersectional environmentalism quite often, and I think have really brought to the forefront a movement that I really am, passionate about, which is the environment and the outside, and how it's incredibly privileged, and how we really haven't been doing enough. And I think that they've done it in a very accessible, interesting, but a really important way. So Green Girl Leah and Patty Gonia.
That's awesome. I'm going to run there, Amahel from Free the Bid. I love this organization. There's someone who's really looked at making more opportunities for people. They started with directors, but they've really widened it out. And, being one of the now not so rare female creative leads of a practice, it's been wonderful to see the progress that's been made in making space for people. And I just feel so much optimism and so much belief. And it's great to see more organizations. It's great to be on panels like this. It's great to see a lot of intentionality in really trying to make sure that more people have opportunities and that we're actually finding great talent out there. I have just a quick story on them. We had a triple bid a TV spot for one of our clients, and all the directors came back, and there were a bunch of male directors, and they were fine, but we didn't have the perfect person. And I said, you know what, actually we're part of Free the Bid, so one of these directors has to be a woman. Go back and look again. When we came down to the final 3 that we put bids out to, all of them were women, because the producers actually looked so much more closely at people's prior work, and they looked at their reels, and they really were more thoughtful, rather than, let me call the guy, like I know a guy, let me call the people I usually work with. Their list got much longer. They looked much closer. And we not only awarded it to a woman, we saw women we never would have seen, and they were amazing. So I do love I think it's going to open us up and set us up to doing so much better work, finding so much more talent, and just kind of democratizing our access to each other and being able to find other really cool people out there, and be able to chat with them for an hour, like we are today. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up the panel part of the discussion. And with, only 6 minutes left. Sorry, bad moderator. We're going to kick it to the Q&A. All right.
Such great conversation, though. Oh my gosh. Can we just stay for another half an hour?
We'll do it again over cocktails.
Yes.
What creativity for good trends do you see emerging in health and wellness? Kathy, I'm going to guess you can take this one.
I think I just took it.
Okay. No, that's great. Sustainability and packaging is a really exciting thing. What's a recent, okay, for each panelist, what's a recent company for good campaign you thought was done really well?
When we're done with this question, can we go back to Blair's question? Because I actually have a lot of thoughts on that.
Oh, yeah. Go for it.
Okay, I'll just start on that one then. So I think, Blair, your question was just about like, if your whole agency isn't on board, or if like your clients aren't totally on board, like how can you move more towards like good questions? For good work. And I think this is really important, because like, while, building a long-term relationship, Regina brought up in a previous conversation, getting your CEO involved is like how you make lasting change. You can still start small. Like, who are you hiring? Who are you spotlighting? What influencers are you working with? Who's like looking at the copy and the creative? Like, there are small things that you can start to do as an individual, and then like, talking to your team, getting it spotlighted, and like bringing all this data and resources that are out there on why for good projects are important. Like, big relationships are where we want to be, but in the meantime, just the small things you can do can help start to move the company and move you guys there.
Absolutely. How do doing good projects communicate their authenticity in a highly skeptical world? How do we get? I think we kind of touched on that.
Yeah.
Be true to it yourself. Yeah. So maybe that question came in before you're there. Can creativity and craft make a difference in doing good projects to make them truly successful? And what about tech? You know, can we talk about the 911? That is a great example to me of the creativity, craft, and tech. Kathy, can you talk about the Deaf 911? Because to me, that is the convergence of all of those things coming together in a piece of work.
Sure, that project is so near and dear to my heart. That was brought to me by a brilliant creative director named Scott Carlton, who's very involved with the church in his neighborhood. And that church is, they brought to him the problem that there was no means for them to speak to 911 if they were in an emergency, because most of them don't have the ability to speak. And most of the call centers across North America really don't have text ability. So you are required to, if you're in an emergency situation, someone's, your house is burning down, or someone broke into your house, the only means to reach 911 would be to call and to speak your problem. And we developed an app that allows text-to-speech abilities. So the call centers didn't have to change. That's going to take 1 million years. It's already taken 1 million years even to get them to the antiquated place that they are right now. But this app allows a deaf person to simply type in what the problem is. It converts it to speech, and then that goes to the call center, and the person call can communicate with them immediately.
Wow. That is so neat.
Anyone else have one specifically on creativity and tech, or should we maybe shift to, because I think we've kind of covered the other questions. Maybe to close off, what's one takeaway that you hope those who've tuned in for the last hour brings with them coming out of this conversation? One piece of advice or one takeaway that for a company or brand trying to do good.
I can start. The one takeaway that I'd like everybody to, it's going to sound a little silly because I came up with this word a couple years ago, or this phrase, but be a good keeper and toucher. And what I mean by that is like establish relationships ahead of time. Like when you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And start now, and create like meaningful relationships with organizations and with people who are out there on the ground doing the really good work. It'll just make your life a lot easier in the long run.
Jack, you look like you have one.
Yeah. So I was going to say that for me, it's making sure that you're always staying curious, always looking for those other answers. And I think nowadays with everything that's going on, we need to stay involved, and we also need to make sure that we're also uncovering our own personal purpose, because only then can you truly find the place that you are going to work and the career that you are going to love having. And I think that's the thing for me. I mean, aligning with the right place at the right time is a really amazing thing, and I want everyone to take the time to uncover their purpose, so they're not just working in a job, but actually finding that career that they're going to love, and then the people that are going to love working alongside them.
That's great. Sandy, can you give us your one?
I mean, one thing that we haven't talked about, but that I think is important, is that it's okay to make mistakes. You're going to make a bunch along the way. Things aren't going to go the way you planned. Things aren't going to be as impactful as you wanted them to be. But I think it's okay, both for you personally and for the companies and brands that you work with. The important thing is acknowledging, learning from it, and being ready to move forward. So it's like kind of cheesy. My mom probably told me that when I was like 7, but I still think it's applicable today.
Totally holds true. I think it's been one of the nicest things about this point in time is I feel like so much of our guard is down. We're literally letting people into our homes and our lives. Everyone in the panel was subjected to my kids screaming in the back of a car yesterday. And I think there's something really wonderful and freeing about that, because we are recognizing each other as people, and we are, hopefully just bringing a little bit more empathy into our work, and a little bit of the facade is gone. So there's something really nice about that. So Kathy, close us out. Give us a word of wisdom for people to remember from this hour.
You know, the thing that I'm thinking about that's come through most clearly to me based on all of you guys and everything that we've been talking about is that we really have to work so much harder with our brands to make sure that we're developing their values and their purpose not based on a catastrophe du jour, but we are giving them sustainable, long-lasting values and purpose that can adapt to anything the world throws at us. But we're not developing them on the spot, because that's when the world is just going to call bullshit.
100%.
There, I close this out with
A word of wisdom. I love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm sorry we've run a little bit over. I hope that you enjoyed the webinar. I hope that you'll be back to watch the next one. And so without further ado, I just want to say thanks.
Yeah.
This is amazing. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jenna. This was incredible panel. Thanks.
Great. I don't know if Rob's going to come back in and pitch the next session for us, but stay tuned. Follow Shorty Awards, and they will tell you when they're doing this next. Ah, there he is.
I wasn't planning on it, but I can. The next one is taking place in about 3 weeks, and will be a focus on LGBTQ plus topics of the day. So please feel free to check that out. And a friendly reminder, the final deadline for the Shorty Social Good Awards of this season is next Wednesday, the 16th. I saw some really interesting work being discussed today and in the chat. So feel free to reach out with any questions, and we'd love to see your work recognized. So thanks, everybody. Great conversation. Come back soon.
Okay. Thanks. Bye, all.
Yeah.